You're listening to Catholic Family Podcast.
Greetings, fellow travelers through the liturgical year. This is Lisa Davis with today's Feast Day Quick Take, February 14th. Will the real Saint Valentine please stand up? It's an interesting and a bit of a perplexing fact that if you go on a search through the early martyrologies, you will find at least 3 different Saint Valentines that have a connection with today's date. This may seem unlikely until you understand that the name Valentine was the John of the ancient world. Seriously. Besides these 3 recorded to have died on February 14th, there are a couple dozen stories of St. Valentines who lived and died before the first half of the first millennium, as well as a Pope Valentine who served for 40 days as the Vicar of Christ before dying in 827 AD. So it is a legitimate question. Which St. Valentine is the actual St. Valentine, who has traveled down the winding road of history and ended up as the patron saint of love and courtship? It's a somewhat sad fact that St. Valentine's feast day is chiefly known in our day as a secular holiday on which we distribute small mass-produced paper cards and remember our loved ones and love in general, which is no intrinsically bad thing. But so few realize this day in the year actually honors a heroic Christian. A Valentine is far more than just a card. There was a real man named Valentine who earned his title in heaven for the supreme act of love, dying for his faith, for love of God. As Catholics, though, we know this, and we do care, don't we? Which Valentine is it? I'm sorry to have to say there is no settled answer, but we can speculate on the 3 most likely. The Saint Valentine behind door 1 is described somewhat vaguely in the martyrologies as having been a priest in Rome sometime near the end of the 3rd century. Behind door number 2, we have another Saint Valentine recorded as being the bishop of what we now know as Terni in central Italy. He was also martyred in the second half of the 3rd century. The 3rd Saint Valentine is recorded as having suffered and died in Africa in the 3rd century as well, but no further details are known about him. The somewhat murky origins of his story, however, and his geographical setting make his claim for the post of patron of romantic love doubtful, so I'm going to eliminate him as most historians have done. This leaves our 2 Roman Saint Valentines, one a priest, one a bishop. But there are some interesting quirks to consider about the lives of Saints Valentine I and II that make it difficult to choose between them. Both accounts of their martyrdom are among the most ancient, first showing up in the 500s, and both stories have oddly coincidental details that most Catholics recognize, in fact, as being connected with today's patron. For instance, St. Valentine the priest and St. Valentine the bishop are believed to have both been buried in the Flaminian Way, just at different distances from the city. Both were said to have inspired the conversion of a great Roman household by healing a child while imprisoned. Both are also connected to stories involving their performing illegal marriage ceremonies for Christian couples. Remember also, both St. Valentine's recorded dates of martyrdom are February 14th specifically, but the years of their deaths are unknown. Curious. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? There's an awful lot of coincidence going on here. If you're wondering if the 2 St. Valentines were actually the same man, but that the records were confused through the centuries, you and I are on the same page. In the days before not just the internet, but before even the printing press, when travel from city to city was difficult and travel between nations almost impossible for most people, it's easy to imagine that one set of monks in one monastery might have set down the verbal history of the Saint Valentine who healed the child while in prison. This could have been kept in the martyrology in the monastery archives. Sometime later, a traveling monk may have stopped by with his quill and vellum and copied down the martyrology to share with his own order, then carried it with him to his monastery, perhaps many days away, where it may have been copied down and shared again and again over the years, and at some point the details of St. Valentine's life may have been added incorrectly or were partially lost. Maybe someone spilled coffee on the parchment, who knows? And the fact that he was a bishop was lost too. The exact year might have been lost along the way in more than one set of histories. There is no way of knowing, and I am only speculating, but it doesn't seem at all far-fetched that one history of the one St. Valentine could have accidentally been misconstrued as two or more histories. But we know he was a true martyr for the faith. His flower-adorned skull can be found in the Basilica of Santa Maria in Cosmedine, Rome. It was found during the early 19th century excavation of a catacomb near Rome, which yielded skeletal remains and other relics now associated with St. Valentine. Many of the relics of St. Valentine have since been distributed to reliquaries around the world. A large piece of the hip bone of St. Valentine can be found within a wax figure of the saint in Old St. Ferdinand's Church in Florissant, Missouri, just outside St. Louis. Other relics can be found in the Czech Republic, Ireland, Scotland, England, and France. There has been a lot of talk over the years that tries to link the pagan feast of Lupercalia to this feast day, claiming that the Church, in an attempt to replace a pagan custom with something more wholesome and Christian, assigned to St. Valentine the patronage of romantic love. This is doubtful, however. First of all, the Feast of Lupercalia was nothing like romantic. It had something loosely to do with young men flailing around with goat skins trying to hit people. Even more to the point, there is no historic record of St. Valentine's feast day being associated with romantic love before the Middle Ages, when Geoffrey Chaucer, the literary superstar of his day, penned a poem that caught the interest of young lovers everywhere, or at least those in the English-speaking and reading population. The poem was called Parliament of Fowls, and it was written in the late 15th century. The pertinent lines go, "For this was sent on St. Valentine's Day, when every fowl cometh there to choose his mate." Seems like a small start, considering how far it's come. But by the 14th century, the connection between St. Valentine's Day and romance were alluded to frequently in literature. And the practice of writing love letters and sending tokens on the day was a well-known practice that persisted fairly consistently, but with mild observance together with Christian devotion, especially in Catholic countries. Enter the Victorian era, the mid-19th century, where a journey through history finds us suffering the sublimation of the Church, the rise of modernism, and the dawn of mass marketing. The custom of sending Valentine's cards, specially packaged Valentine's bouquets, and heart-carrying stuffed animals has taken over most people's celebration of the day. St. Valentine himself has been forgotten. But we as Catholics know better. Whoever the real St. Valentine was, he might be shocked to know that this day had become a holiday that it has become. And while the whole Cupid bit and the pink hearts and gaudy cards might cause some raised eyebrows amongst the group of St. Valentines, whom I can imagine gathered together, watching us from their ringside seats in the heavenly court, I imagine that the concept of the day wouldn't upset them too much. Love in the form of true Christian charity, in the commitment between a husband and a wife, or in the hopes of young people looking for lifetime mates is never a bad thing. St. Valentine, and incidentally any of the other potential Valentines, were listed as martyrs. The one thing we know for sure is that today's saint died for love of God. Proof positive that St. Valentine is perfectly placed as the patron of romantic love. Nobody understands true love like the martyrs. It is true, too, that as a priest or a bishop, our saint would be interested in our love lives. All shepherds of souls pray for the children under their care to find godly love in their mates when their vocations are the married states. We can find no greater peace and happiness, no truer love, than to find a spouse whose chief desire in marriage is to work toward heaven together, toward finally meeting the greatest love, our Lord Jesus Christ.